News Central's comprehensive coverage of the End Bad Governance protests reveals that protests have taken place in many states in the northern region of the country, while many southeastern states shunned the protest. The Federal Capital Territory FCT, Kano, Borno, Yobe and Nasarawa were among the states where protests turned violent, with reports of police deploying tear gas and live gunshot rounds to disperse protesters who came out in their numbers.
Compared to the northern turnout, SBM Intelligence reports that there were no protests in states like Abia, Imo, Anambra on day one of the protest and records of same day on subsequent days. SBM Intelligence suggests that there is a significant fear that Igbo involvement in protests could be misinterpreted as rebellion, or their activism could be labeled as an attempt to overthrow the government or make it uncomfortable. This comes amidst calls for the government to address recent marginalization against the Igbos stemming from a tweet by the Lagos Pedia on X calling for a protest to evict the Igbos from southwest states. Now, you look at the tweet, that was the initial tweet. It said, Lagosians and every southwest stakeholders should prepare for the massive protest of Igbo must go on the 20th and 30th of August. They have 1 month from now to leave and relocate their businesses. It says from all southwest states, it says, we all urge all Yorubas living in the southeast to return home. Now, just to mention that the Lagos state government has dissociated itself from this tweet, and a number of Nigerians have dissociated themselves from that tweet and sort of criticized it, even though some people have shown some measure of support. But talking about it this morning, we have joining us lawyer and public affairs analyst from Birnin Kebbi, Umar Aminu Kalgo. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. My pleasure.
All right.
To be here.
Now, let's talk about, the lack of involvement on the part of the Igbos in this protest, even though we can clearly talk about the fact that the effect or the result of this, the cause of this protest is an underlying factor that affects all Nigerians, including the Igbos. Part of SBM Intelligence reports state that the reason why they're not a part of the protest is because they have fears of their actions being misinterpreted as an attempt to topple the current administration. So talk to us about your thoughts regarding Igbo non-participation in the protest, and then after that we can get into the conversation about marginalization.
I think the non-participation in the protest from the southeast states is very clear, because the Ohaneze and IGBO, the social cultural group that is most influential in that part has been consistent on the issue of this protest even before it began. It calls on all people of that area, particularly those of the extraction of the Igbo tribe, not to participate in the protest. And they call and lay foundation as to their call due to what they refer to as the past experience of such riots and the loss of property and lives that was involved. So I could say it had been a consistent call that they should not join, and this call was heeded too, as we can see in practical terms, that I think the only geographical region where there were no protests was in the southeast. And so this is the background as to the reason why there was no protest in that region. By and large, is the influence of the Ohaneze on their calls. And this time, the youth have rallied and followed what their elders have said in that region. So this is what practically have translated to the lack of participation on that part. Though there are a lot of political insinuations also by some commentators that that region, as we know, during the politicking time, have not voted for the government, and so they are allowing the people who even voted for the government to protest against the government that they brought. But whatever, I would say, whichever way you see it, it comes down to the heat by the call and influence of Ohaneze in Igbo.
All right. I'm sure, I mean, there's been one moment or the other where Ohaneze, has tried to cajole members from the southeast, and they have not necessarily, taken their advice. So it may not necessarily be Ohaneze and Igbo's advice, that is working out here, but we'll get back to it. I want us to speak with Umar Kirawa, who's our reporter who's joining us, and then we'll come back to you, Mr. Kalgo. Umar, good morning.
Very good morning to you all.
All right, just confirm your location and what the situation is over there.
Yes, I am in Maiduguri, the Borno State capital, and the situation is that of calm, cool, and peace.
Okay, I mean, is this the way it's been in the last few days, or is, this Monday morning different?
Well, this Monday morning is different with regard to 1st August, which is the first day of the nationwide protest. The first day of August witnessed a very rowdy and, of course, but young people stormed major streets to protest, to join their counterparts across the country in protest with what they called bad governance. However, taking into consideration the years of insurgency which Borno State and other communities and the Lake Chad went through, the state government and, of course, stakeholders, even non-indigenous, have advocated for non-participation even before the day came, taking into consideration the years of insurgency and how people are recovering, struggling to survive and a means of survival. So by and large, the day for us now here in Borno is peaceful as people go about their day-to-day activities in struggle to earn a means of survival.
Were any lives lost, in Maiduguri in the last few days?
Yes, we've had incidences of life lost, but for now, nobody can ascertain the number of life lost because there was a restriction of vehicular movement, and nobody can give account unless the government will give account of number of life lost in different locations within the metropolis.
All right. Can you talk to us about the security operatives and how they have conducted themselves? Because we've seen in different parts of the country, for example, in Abuja, where they've been accused of being perpetrators of the mayhem that's been, unleashed there. Is that also an allegation that we're hearing from Borno? How have they carried out themselves in all of this?
Well, honestly, with all sense of honesty to the security personnel, at the initial stage, it was a peaceful one, where they were even leading the protesters. But however, they led to some certain degree of movement where the security, they told the protesters to stop so that they are skeptical about the situation where they have been suspecting maybe some unscrupulous element will join the protesters to cause mayhem. And then the protesters revolted to...
Maru, we're struggling with your audio. It seems that there's a slight disconnection. Maybe check your mouthpiece if you've covered it, and please go ahead. All right, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Better. Continue.
Yes, like I was saying, at the initial stage of the protests on 1st August 2024, it was a peaceful one where the security operatives were even leading the protesters to advocate for what they want from the government and what they need. However, they led to certain locations whereby the security personnel started restricting the protesters so that they were skeptical, some unscrupulous elements may join them and then cause mayhem, lead to destruction of properties. And of course, the protesters revolted which led to the apply of force. Initially, they used persuasive means to advocate for the protesters not to reach certain level. But however, when that fails, the personnel have no any other option than to apply force.
All
They
right.
started deployment of tear gas and so on and so forth.
All right, Umar, we of course will reconnect with you again. Thank you very much for sharing with us live updates from Maiduguri this morning. Please stay safe, remember that. And now let's go back to our guest, a public affairs analyst in Birnin Kebbi, Umar Aminu Kalgo. I want your thoughts on the protests in northern Nigeria. There, seem to be reports of seeming more violence in the protests in northern Nigeria. Reports also of more casualties of the protests. So let's first of all get your reactions to how it turned out in northern Nigeria. Do they have more reasons to protest? Is it worrisome seeing how things turned out in the last 3-4 days?
Concerning this protest, I would say in the northern parts of Nigeria, it has been a violent protest, as you can see. And if you gauge the protest, I would say by and large in the north, it has not been successful, having been overtaken by violence. So that to the extent that we have a curfew in a lot of states in the northern part. We were looking at Plateau as being an exemplary protest, but things have turned around. This morning, I have seen headlines where in Plateau North, there was a curfew, also 24-hour curfew imposed. So looking at this country, if you are to take the North as an example with regarding to this protest, I would say the North have come out as a failed exercise because the protest that followed, the looting and the violence that followed is unprecedented. If you look at when you look at, you get this protest, most of the lives that were lost are within these northern states, especially in the northwest, and equally there are some casualties in the northeast as well. So the fears that were raised before these protests are that it may be overtaken by violence. So this turned out to be the case in the northern part of Nigeria.
Yeah, but aren't you bothered, with the reaction of the Nigerian police in these northern states?
You see, the situations are different pertaining to where I want to give an example at my state, Kebbi State. You see, in Kebbi State, the protest was begun peacefully. It was not that very large. And at one time, the protesters are trying to reach the government house when they were fired with tear gas. Yes, in Kebbi State, it is in Yauri, another town, where there was some looting. But the one that was happening here in the capital city, it was peaceful, but later tear gas was fired. Well, to my liking, I would have loved that the police behave more professionally in dealing with that crowd, which I see as not beyond them for them to manage. But that is not the case in other states. If you look at Kano, for example, the mayhem that was unleashed must be controlled. So the situation is different. And that's why the extent of what happened in Kano, you can see the NCC center, how it was looted. No, it's pathetic if you see what is happening in Kano. Even the culverts covering the drainages were broken to remove the roads that were in. So in such a situation, the police must try to contain that kind of situation. So I think by and large, there are areas where call for direct force to try and put the situation under control. But I would say I would have loved to see how these protests have gone in parts of Lagos where I saw it very controlled. So In Abuja too, I think it could be managed because of the civility that was there in the people that are protesting. So I will urge our police to be more, professional in how they handle, and they should be commended in some their acts in certain parts of the country.
I mean, I maybe would agree that they should be commended in certain parts of the country, not very many, but generally, when we're talking about loss of lives like this, it should be something that should be completely condemned and investigated to know if, there was a legitimate reason why live ammunition needed to be fired in any part of the country, and the loss of every Nigerian life, regardless of whatever, reasons that are being pulled together. If you're saying that the NCC building being attacked warranted live rounds being fired at protesters, I'm sure a lot of people would not agree with that. Or the destruction of culverts, that used to cover the gutters in Kano State. None of those demand or warrant the firing of live rounds at any protesters in any part of the world. Quickly speak on the emergence of Russian flags that we saw in parts of the protests in northern Nigeria. What does that mean, and where do you think that is coming from?
You see, any life that is lost is worth investigating, as you said. I'm just bringing the situation that is an unfortunate situation that you have lost of life. But mob action, whenever unleashed, is very hard to control. So I'm not saying that these things should not be investigated. With regards to the Russian flag that was seen, I have heard commentators talking about it, but I want to say that it calls for concern. It's not just a single Russian flag that you saw, but you see a group of children, and young men, all of them carrying the Russian flag. Yes, this should be an influence of what is happening in maybe the Niger and Mali situation. But bringing it here to this country, I think it is something that should raise concern, because those children that are carrying those flags are not necessarily the ones sending the message, but they are just a conduit that was used to portray it. So I think our security agencies should have a close look at that incident. And I think also the government should look at it very well. Although I don't want to overblow it, I don't think it is anywhere to suggest things that had happened in Mali and Niger. No, not at all. The democracy we have in Nigeria is stronger, and the base for it is more firm than in the other countries. So I would like to say that it is an unfortunate incident to see such a thing, and we should not take it lightly or think that it is something that is just accidental without having any connotation. No, that cannot be. I think it is a deliberate attempt for some people that are behind to have engaged such children to carry such these flags to send a message.
All right. Interesting, that the flags can readily be even found in those parts of the country, because I don't think you can just randomly find Russian flags available in Edo State or in any other random state in the country. But thank you very much for joining us this morning, Umar Aminu Kalgo. We hope that we get to speak with you again.